Welcome to Harbinger and Workato's joint webinar.
Select the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker from audio settings. If necessary, join the webinar using your phone. Use the Q&A panel to share your questions. This webinar is being recorded. Attendees will receive the recording. Let's begin.
Hello everyone, my name is Shrikant Pattathil. Welcome to today's Power Hour brought to you by Harbinger Group and Workato. We have a very interesting session today to discuss about workforce productivity and agentic workflows, and how it's relevant in today's times in terms of changing and transforming the whole workforce for the future. For many years, we believed that productivity was about using tools better, doing your tasks faster, and so forth. However, with AI, that whole perception is being challenged from on all fronts. So, people have having to reimagine their whole idea about productivity and tools and what systems and workflows can do for themselves. So we'll be touching about many such things in today's webinar. A quick intro about myself. I'll be the host for today's session. I've been a technologist for over 2 decades. My passion is to look at the intersection of how emerging technologies and product development kind of go hand in hand. The core domains that I've specialized in is HR, learning, workforce, productivity, and so forth. So today's topic is quite close to my heart in terms of how we are thinking about the future of talent transformation, workforce productivity, and so forth. So I'm looking forward to having a great discussion. And before I bring in my panelist in, I will take a few minutes to give you a quick overview about what are we going to discuss during the course of this session. So as far as the game plan is concerned, it's a broad topic, and I'm sure we will not be able to cover all of it, but we significantly want to talk about what does one mean by productivity itself and this new way of doing things and working with agentic platforms, transforming the workforce to work alongside these agentic platforms and so forth. The second thing is we're going to touch upon about is the whole workflows perspective, right? I mean, how workflows, how to rethink in terms of workflows, and where humans kind of fit into that whole ecosystem. And finally, we will also touch about, what kind of platforms might be interesting to consider, things like governance and data and so forth. So we'll try to cover all these perspectives through some examples, through some trends and so forth. So that's pretty much what we are planning to do. Just to give you some perspectives and background, we talked about productivity and what it means. And the first thing when agentic AI came or generative AI came into place, most of the organizations, one of their primary targets was to use AI for productivity and efficiency improvements. And that's and if you look at any kind of research, you will see numbers like 63% of the organizations are focusing on, or probably 75%, different numbers, but predominantly the first and foremost thing that most organizations are trying to do is trying to make their workforce more productive or their process and systems more productive and be and get the competitive edge. However, if you look at when organizations have matured here, like spent a couple of years doing this, adopting AI, we also see things like only 5% are have gained anything on the productivity side, right? And almost others are still, prototyping their systems, going back and forth. And there could be many reasons why, people are not getting the productivity that they set forth for when it comes to AI. And that will be the focus of today's discussion as well. So saying that, okay, productivity in small increments, everybody is seeing, but when it comes to the entire operational efficiency, or whether it comes to their entire way of doing things, not much, the needle hasn't moved much. And the three reasons could be, the as a leadership, how are you adopting some of these changes, and how are you looking at the way you are doing the work itself? Secondly, the whole workforce upskilling is also a very important aspect. Like, people in the ops teams are wanting to work with AI applications which are not same as SaaS platforms. These are probabilistic system, not deterministic system. So how do you work with some of these things? And what will be the new workflows where humans and agents are supposed to work together and be more and more productive. So the problem compounds when you try to scale it across organizations, across teams, across functions, and so forth. So, and HR is a great use case, because HR touches so many things in terms of different departments, different people, different systems, and it's a complex use case when it comes to driving automation, because it not only drives automation and productivity from the HR team's perspective, but they are also responsible to make sure that the other departments and the entire business is also performing and highly productive. So looking at it from the lens of the HR is going to be very crucial, and that's what we are trying to bring to you today. So on that note, let me bring in our panelists. And let me first welcome Chun Yen Ku, Senior Director, Global People Operations at Workato. Chun, great to have you. If I may request you to please introduce yourself and, specifically say a few words in terms of what is so interesting about this topic.
Sure. Thank you, Shrikant. Hi, everyone. I'm Chun Yen. I lead the global people operations team at Workato. And so my job is to make sure that all of our HR systems are well connected to each other to enable our people programs to run efficiently and effectively, supporting our employees, our managers, and as well as our internal teams. Well, the reason why I'm really interested in this topic is because that's what my job is, right? It's about driving productivity. But I think later on we're going to be talking about what it means to be productive, right? And I have I think my views on it have changed over time, and so I like to share my perspective and maybe also have some questions around if people are thinking about it differently as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Chun. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. And we are really looking forward to, because you are also coming in from an implementation perspective, and share your experience as to what success you've seen and what challenges you have faced. Moving on, let me bring in Subodh, VP of Technology and an expert in the workforce enablement and productivity space. Subodh, welcome to this panel discussion. And if you want to briefly introduce yourself and also share, why this topic is close to your heart.
Thank you, Shrikant, and hello everyone. Glad to be on this Power Hour. So in my role, my focus is to help customers make the right technology choices so that they can actually deliver the appropriate business outcomes rather than just going with the technology hype. And Another focus aspect is also on the HCM practice, where I get to work with enterprises and different HR tech clients on understanding what their technology problems and solutions are. Now, in recent months or in the past year, the focus has been more towards how the agentic orchestration, the workflows are being implemented, specifically in the HR departments of different companies, where they're trying to move away from these point solutions and redesigning it. But what really forms the base is the core of today's topic is how do these systems affect productivity of humans, and what value can agentic AI bring to operations, to workforce, to learning, and all these aspects. So very excited to be on this Power Hour to share some of our experiences and also learn from Chun and Shrikant on some of the aspects that they are thinking about.
Wonderful, Subodh. Glad to have you as well, and we will probably pick your brain a little bit on the data and orchestration side and governance side of things as well, as you have implemented some of these platforms. So let me get started with the first question to Chun here. And I think one of the things that we were discussing before as well, Chun, in the past was the definition of productivity itself is changing with this whole AI and agentic systems that we are working with. What's your thought as to how should organizations look at productivity based on your experience using these technologies now, and also trying to implement and see the results?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very important question because, well, first to answer the question, I think AI has changed what productivity means in organizations. But I don't think it's in the way that most people talk about it. I think for a very long time, productivity was measured around throughput, right? How many tickets were closed? And I run a support team, right? So like that used to be what we measure. How many workflows were automated? Again, one of those things that we were, measuring how quickly teams could execute, right? And just counting, how many, manual steps were being removed from the process. And all those were really important, right? And those helped in productivity and getting things done really quickly and how fast we could onboard people, and so on. But I think, where AI changed, and I saw that was, and let me give an example to illustrate that, right? It's when we went through our Workday go live just last month, and when we built HR Genie, right, an AI assistant alongside the Workday go live, and that's when I started seeing productivity differently. And why I say that is because I feel like the biggest productivity drain in organizations is often not the work itself, right? But it's the friction around the work, right? The friction meaning, where do I click? Which systems own this, right? And having to remember, like, oh, do I go to Workday? Do I go to Jira or ServiceNow, Salesforce and so on? And then who needs to approve? Where do I find the information, right? And I had two examples of way to illustrate that. One is during the rollout, there was a ticket that was opened by an employee asking about compensation information. He was like, "This is not right. Like something's not right." And I was like, I checked his profile and I was like, "This seems right to me. What are you seeing?" We went back and forth 6 times, right, over 2 hours in that ticket itself, trying to locate his compensation information in Workday. Turns out nothing was broken. We were just looking at different things, different parts of the same system. And so, like, having to navigate a new interface was challenging, right? At the same time, separately, we had an AI assistant, right? Which, in this case, the employee was not using. That's layered on top of Workday using Workato's MCP integration, that we hosted on, all of the conversational interfaces that our employees were using. So for us, it was Slack, ChatGPT, and Claude. And where employees type what they needed in plain language, and then the agent kind of like handled the rest of it. And this was really simple, right? It was really straightforward. Employees just type what they wanted. It didn't need a walkthrough. It didn't need a user guide, right? No training decks. And then they just not only got the information they need, but completed the action they wanted to do. Like, for example, apply a time off or know who to reach out to and so on. And then they just moved on from it. And so to me, those two examples contrast what I think of as interface reduction, right? The idea that the real value of AI is not about automating the task itself, really still important, but collapsing the distance between the people, right, and the outcome they're trying to reach. And so, it's not about putting another app on someone's plate to learn. When AI actually works well, that the technology disappears into the workflow, right? They just get things done. I'm gonna stop here because I have a lot to share. But that will be my initial take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, Chun, in terms of reducing the interface gaps or, closing. Everybody has a different way of executing things, and you don't have to be constrained with learning an interface or a application, and that shouldn't define your levels of productivity. The productivity is almost about how you get some things done and complete. So I think great examples. Thanks for sharing that. Subodh, your views on this particular question. What are your thoughts?
And Shrikant, I completely agree with Chun that the old definition of productivity was based more on throughput and
Mm.
investments were made on that. So that's why productivity in the traditional sense of number of tickets closed or reports generated or tasks completed, it mattered quite a lot. But what fundamentally has changed, and for talking with a bunch of people, what we realized is that the agents, they can do 100 times faster, more volume work than what humans can. So putting them or viewing them with the same lens, it just becomes unrealistic and unfair because an HR agent can perhaps answer hundreds of queries at the same time, whereas a human would take perhaps a couple of days to get to all of those. So hence the definition of productivity in the conventional sense, it doesn't make sense anymore, and something new has to come up. So it could be something like humans, they're more focused on the quality and the impact that their judgment brings to the piece of work.
Mm.
So organizations, they sort of try to understand what impact was made rather than how many tickets were completed, what was the volume of work, what was the throughput, and so on. And a classic example, just to add to what Chun had said, we are working with a benefits administration service provider, and one of the complex tasks over there is to go through like hundreds of pages of insurance brochures and documents that a insurance company would provide to HR and understand from that and then fill out a sufficiently complex form inside the benefits tool, which has like different criteria and qualifying events and rules and rates and all of those. And conventionally, this work is done by humans because that's where the human judgment comes in. But now, as AI has progressed, this entire task can be automated. And it's not a case that humans don't understand how to read the documents, but AI can just do it faster so that the focus of humans can be on understanding whether this is the right plan for the organization, whether it suits the larger population, whether we are making a choice that the plan is only good for a certain department or a certain geography, and so on. So we are essentially focusing or refocusing the attention from something about reading a document and filling a form to making more strategic decisions about whether a plan is right in the first place or not. So that's how we need to look at the change in productivity. It's no longer about form filling, it's more about decision making.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a good point that you bring up, that the way humans were considered to be more productive, that part is also changing. So yeah, I think June covered about the whole workflow and collapsing the interface part of it, but the human judgment also, and what we measure in terms of the human productivity, that also is changing as we go through this process. So interesting. Thanks for sharing that point. Let me get into some of the practical side of things, right? And June, let me kind of ask you this question because you're implementing it for your own teams as well, these agentic workflows. Most of the HR leaders, they're worried whether they have the data, or the data foundation that they have within the organization is ready for scalable AI or not. So what would be your advice to them, so they get the entire data in place, and then kind of start their whole agentic journey, or there's some other middle ground, or what's your thought process there?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be too hung out on asking whether like is the entire organization or if the entire data foundation is AI ready. But really thinking about which parts, right, of the HR data that we can genuinely trust today, right? Because um I think the fun part is also the scary part about AI, right? Is AI amplifies whatever operational reality you have, right? So if your data's not ready, AI is got I mean it's rubbish in, rubbish out, right? So
Yeah.
it's just gonna amplify whatever you already have. And so but there must be some part of your organization that's ready for, automation, for AI and so on, right? And so our example here internally is that we spend a lot of time aligning our core workforce data with finance in order for us to do our quarterly board reporting and so on, right? And so we think about like, who is an FTE, what counts as a head count, and how do we think about workforce planning? And so I think there's a joke around that, like when you depends on who you ask, right? Your numbers can range very, very differently, right? And and that is true because when you operate across multiple countries, and for us over 25 countries, a full-time employee in the US does not mean the same thing somewhere else, right? In Singapore or in the UK and so on, right? Or a part-time threshold could also differ. And then the local employment structures could also be different and so on. So like I think before, we talk about AI insights, we need to align on, what exactly are we measuring, which system is the source of truth, and which definitions are globally consistent or locally specific, right? And then when we design for it, then it's gonna make AI scalable a lot faster. There are some areas where you're not ready yet, and I think that's fine, right? So like internally, it's not like we have everything is all great, right? Like our job architecture, our compensation ranges, we need to refresh them, right? And so before we feel comfortable kind of like layering AI on top of it. And so um for us, if we think about like, hey, if the underlying data is inconsistent or unevenly applied, then the AI generated insights could be difficult to trust. And when that happens, and when your managers or your employees stop trusting the outputs, that's when your adoption dies, right? Like slowly but surely. And so I think it's important to think about like, hey, which parts you're ready to expose the data to on, and then which ones you want to kind of spend some time kind of tidying up right on the back end before you expose it, and think about all of the implications before you do it. Yeah.
Makes sense. So thanks for sharing that. And do you, from an HR leader's perspective, because they're using these variety of systems, right? Be it an HRIS, an LMS, an ATS, a performance management system. Uh, do they have to take data out of these systems to build the agentic workflows, or that's not necessary? You can still build it as long as you can build the connections or whatever. So just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so Workato being the integration layer of systems, that's what we do. And so where if the data is say accurate in your ATS and accurate in your HRIS, and you want to be helping managers see uh headcount and do headcount planning, right, from a recruiting perspective and from the existing workforce perspective, that could be easily done using Workato's MCP technology, kind of like connect the dots in between. But if there are some pieces of information that's not quite ready, and maybe you need some kind of manual extraction of data in the meantime, like that's also possible. And
Okay.
so it really is about taking stock of what is ready, and then using technologies like Workato to kind of like bridge the gaps, right? Like the integration, to make sure that the integration layer is there to to give your AI agents all of the data it requires to be fed in, and then to push the output to the requester.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a valid point that if you don't have all the data in one place, then you think of an orchestration tool or an integration solution as well and build AI and leverage AI, from and by creating that integration layer. So that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So both
Shrikant,
any,
sorry,
yeah,
Shrikant,
of
can I just
course.
add one more point?
Yeah,
I think, because I speak with a lot of customers, right, to also learn from them. And I mean, there's two groups of customers, right? There's the group where, like us, like we use the best of breed for every system, right? So we use something for ATS, something for HCM, something for learning management, and so on. But there are also companies that have, invested a lot of money in buying a one-stop shop, right? But even then, right, like, do you, I think going back to my earlier response about interface reduction, do you ask employees to go into a system to work, or do you bring the system to where they're working, right? Whether it's Slack or now Claude or ChatGPT. That's one part, right? And that's also only just looking at HR, right? So if you're using Workday, SuccessFactors, that's just one piece of the puzzle. But if you're looking at your Salesforce, right, they could also be using, well, a CRM, right? And they could be using another billing system and so on. And so, like, it's not just about the HR systems we have, but also looking at the broader kind of like tooling sets that we have. And that's when, like an orchestration platform like would be really helpful to kind of connect the dots across all of the systems beyond just the HR systems itself. Yeah, and I think that's where it's I think the power of technology and AI being able to pull all the data through MCP servers is really powerful. Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it's not when you're dealing with productivity and solving that sort of a problem, it's not just one platform or one business department's data that is necessary. You probably have to go across, and that time the integration of the orchestration solution that you place in the middle becomes even more critical and necessary. Makes sense. I think thanks for sharing that. Subodh, maybe I can probably pick your brain on the not on the data side, but so much like assuming somebody is adopting AI and dealing with a lot of this information back and forth and inferring using agentic platforms and so forth. Uh, as HR team or IT team, you're also worried about the data security and governance. And from your experience perspective, what advice you have, to make sure that you don't go far deep and create issues there, but it goes hand in hand with your AI journey. So, um, so any thoughts on this particular area?
Sure. So Shrikant, one thing which when we are talking with customers, I think absolutely they have this thing the back of their minds that, okay, is this data going to be compromised? Is it, how secure is the whole thing, and what governance and guardrails are going to be there? And what our advice to them is, don't look at data security and governance as an afterthought. It's ideally a precondition that you put into the AI function or the initiative that you're running. Though you may run it in milestones, but AI governance, it sort of goes in hand when you're trying to lay the building blocks of the AI solution. And the reason for this is that a year back, AI tools, they were very static in nature. You ask them a question, they look at some kind of a vector database and give you an answer. And those tools were considered as safe. But now with agents coming in, these agents are far more dynamic in nature. They are going to access information, they are going to write back into the databases, they are going to move data across systems, they are going to correlate information from different sources together. And then, of course, they are going to put it onto some kind of an interface. So the AI thing has sort of moved beyond just being chatbots or co-pilots, but now these are sort of becoming decision-making systems. So hence, the whole data security and governance aspect has to be baked in from the very beginning. And what we tell our customers is follow very three basic simple rules over here. So one is build systems or build agents, build an agentic ecosystem with the least privileges that you can provide. So the agent should only be able to access information or run workflows that they're supposed to do. Don't give them additional information unless the business use case talks about it. The second aspect is to have audit trails baked into the agent itself, rather than it being augmented to it when things are about to go to production. And the reason for that is to make sure that you are able to trap or access information at the right points, or record it, so that whenever an audit or a review happens, you are not scratching your head at that time. So audit trails baked into the system is the second point that we talked about. And then the third one is to have the CISO or the CSO office sort of looped into the whole agentic development right from the beginning. And they sort of become the co-designers of the whole system. So that way, that does not become a roadblock later on, because their inputs are going to be always valuable before things go to production. So rather than involving them at the way end, involve them as co-designers into the whole solution. And same goes for the governance aspect as well. So governance, it cannot be like a last minute thing, because with some of these AI governance tools that we are building and we are implementing, they are able to understand the drifts in the models that take place over a span of time. So it's always, people assume that, okay, once I've built the model, it is great forever. And that's not the case. The model is going to change because the data is going to change, the behavior is going to change, the core model is going to change. And what can help you sort of understand this, trap this, are these AI governance tools and the checklists that they come up with. So again, like AI governance, security, one needs to think of them from the onset rather than it being an afterthought, and cleverly bake in those steps into the overall process. So that way it doesn't slow you down at the end. So that's how what we have been telling our customers.
Yeah, you laid it out in very easy steps. So, but from a question I have for you is maybe a simple thing. Do these governance systems exist in the platforms that you're buying, or you have to do this separately?
Now there are two school of thoughts over here. The industry preferred way is to have it as a separate platform, because some CISOs are not really comfortable by having the platforms sort of govern or test themselves, and rather than have a separate entity do that. So it's like you yourself are doing the penetration testing of your product and certifying yourself, saying that, hey, we are great. So hence having a third party look into it gives more trust to the buyer rather than sort of a self-certification, if that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a valid point, but there is also a cost factor. Maybe that's for a separate discussion. We will not cover that here right now, but yeah, I think how many things are we going to buy? So, so let's keep the discussion going. And I think, Chun, you touched about the connected systems and the orchestration that when we're talking about the data thing. So now, if I just use an AI tool and I don't do any connect it with my other platforms and systems, and think through that whole workflow orchestration, do you think it is like then the productivity that I will gain is much lesser than if I were to reimagine my whole way of doing things? So what's been your experience in this aspect? Should I just look at it as one tool, or whether I look at platform, systems, process? What's
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where we started, right? When I think a few years ago we had bought a knowledge retrieval system. And it was great. I used it every day. I was like, oh, if I can finally find my data from wherever it is, right? Google Drive, maybe it was a Slack conversation, maybe it was a knowledge base, it was hosted on Confluence or somewhere else. And I was finding data very quickly. But we quickly ran into the problem of like, okay, now I have the data. I know something about this policy itself or this conversation we had. And I kind of want to take action. Then I have to go log into somewhere else to get the action done, right? And so knowledge retrieval is important, is key to making sure that you have the right information at hand. But then all of us were running into the issue of like, but we can't close the loop, right? The reason why we're looking for a piece of information is because we want to take action on it. And so going back to the question, I think it is very important to have your systems connected, right? Not just for you to do your knowledge retrieval, but allow you to take action on it, right? And so one example internally as well, right? When before HR Genie, right, our AI assistant was connected to live workday data, it could answer general questions, right? Pulled from our Confluence knowledge base, answering questions around time off, leave of absence, and whatever was available on our Confluence knowledge base. It's useful in a way that, I think what Subho was talking about, right? Like when you have a lot of documentation, and AI could help you read and figure out like what is relevant. But once we connected it to real life employee data, it knew who we were, and it could pull the most relevant information and then help you execute on what you needed, right? So it now know that you are an employee living in the UK, for example, and you've been with us for 5 years, and therefore you're eligible for XYZ benefits. And therefore, it could give you a much more intelligent response and then help you complete the rest of the actions needed, right? And that's a way, way more powerful than it is. So, other than, content generation is really about making it operational. I think if we take it one step further, a sales leader could be asking an AI agent, right? Which strategic accounts may be at risk in the upcoming quarter. And if you think about it, it's not just about your CRM data, right? So maybe you have Salesforce, right, or HubSpot for your account health, your pipeline exposure. But then you also think about like the HR systems, right? For your recent attrition, that's really important. Your open headcount gaps, your recruiting system for the hiring progress, or some blockers. And then maybe you want to be looking at your support systems for any customer escalation patterns. And then finance systems for territory planning and so on. And so a sales leader would need to go to all of these systems to find that information. And if we could pull it all together for the sales leader and help them, pull all these different signals and then help them interpret together in context, and that would be a lot more powerful, because what could have looked really healthy just looking at CRM itself may not be so, right? Because maybe the assigned CSM who has been working on the account resigning 2 weeks ago, and we're still trying to find a replacement, and then that could result in potentially the customers not being well taken care of, right? In the meantime and so on. So those are some things that could become a really powerful tool for our employees and our managers when we can pull all the different data together. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for giving that, examples that goes across departments, because many a times when you think about tools or agentic workflows, you're only thinking about, your own use cases, your own, workforce and so forth. But when it comes to productivity and making a difference in the organization itself, um, you need to think beyond, and that's where connecting all these platforms together, and because now these are agents, and they can query each other from MCP or the way they were built, and you can create it pretty dynamically. The ability to solve a problem like the way you described it is possible, and only when you think about it and implement it in that fashion, probably you'll see the productivity and the impact being much larger than what just automating within a platform or within a system might give you. So So yeah, interesting. And on this note, let me also bring in Subodh's point, because he kind of helps engineer and orchestrate some of these solutions. So uh, Subodh, of course, we can connect all these platforms and systems, like but how easy or complex it is based on your experience. Like, is it going to cost me a lot of money to do it? Is it going to take a lot of time and like a lot of dependencies? And are there any tips you have that can make this less painful?
Sure. Yeah, Shrikant, I think that's a very controversial point that you have brought up, because I think on paper this thing sounds very, very simple, that okay, this is like a classic enterprise and every data it moves from here and there. But when we are actually trying to do these things, implement certain solutions, it turns out to be a very, very complex problem. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So number one is that the time to market is often underestimated over here. Like the expectation is that, okay, I'm going to have a solution out there in a couple of weeks, and it could end up taking a significantly more amount of time. And the reason for that is uh, an enterprise, they use easily around 50 or 60 different systems across all their operations. And some of these are like latest technologies, and some of them are legacy technologies. Some of them could be mainframe systems. Many of these are homegrown products. So not necessarily are they like API first architecture or API ready. Some of them even exchange data through flat files. So connecting them together is a part of the problem, because that's where you are going to have data mismatches, fragmentation, different kinds of types. If you're trying to build a real-time system, there are going to be latency issues that are going to come in. So those aspects need to be considered when you're doing on the technical side. The human side or the culture side of it is even more critical, because different departments or different stakeholders own these systems. So an HR system is, or like a Workday is owned by the HR team. The ITSM could be owned by the IT team. The sales operations could have Salesforce. The L&D department could have their homegrown LMS. And aligning them together, making sure that their APIs are ready, they are okay sharing data, there are data agreements in place, there are certain protocols that need to be followed, there could be n number of red tapes that one needs to get through. And that is what causes majority of the problem. So it's less of a technical challenge, it's more of a culture or like an operational challenge that we run into when we are doing these systems. So, but all of that is bad news. The good news is that there are two accelerators or two ways in which this thing can be simplified and done some comparatively faster. So one is have like a very strong orchestration layer like Workato, where there are like hundreds of pre-built connectors. There is like easy to use methods for creating the recipes or scripts that are required, use the MCP agents to sort of have data move back and forth, and not really rely on like very basic rudimentary point-to-point solutions. So that technology exists for that to happen. The second one is more of a mindset change. And that's where we sort of recommend that try to have workflows that have clear triggers and clear outcomes. So rather than chasing certain speculative workflows or very, very ambitious workflows, go with something that's very simple. So a simple thing could be an employee is moving from one location to another. So there's a trigger that a location change has happened. The outcome is that the employee needs to be onboarded onto a different system. And then there are a host of different systems that come into play. As long as the workflow is clear to all the departments that are involved, whose systems are going to play a role in this, the cooperation, the mindset change it's going to happen far more simpler. And the implementation timelines, they will not be significantly delayed, because everyone understands what data is needed, to what extent it needs to be shared, rather than making a blanket statement to someone saying that, hey, I need access to your entire system for my workflow project to take off or my AI project to work. And so start small and use a strong orchestration layer. That should ease off things quite a bit in any of these implementation projects that one might undertake.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that view. So it's the same problem that existed earlier. People, as long as people are open, technology exists. You can solve them. Uh, and but what you're saying is it's possible to use intelligent platforms and orchestration solutions to reduce that friction. So that's encouraging to know that it's not that big of a challenge if you really intend to make it. So yeah, I mean, you touched on the culture side, and I think that's an interesting part. We're talking about all this productivity gain, transforming and doing all these workflows and stuff like that. And this is where I'd like to, bring in Chun, and she's doing it herself in the departments, in a large organization like Workato. So, Chun, of course, it's more than the technology challenge. It's like it seems like a people and culture challenge as well, simultaneously, that we are dealing with. So what are your thoughts on this whole AI transformation, right? And any advice for HR leaders or enterprises as to how they navigate these two things at the same time? Any thoughts, any suggestions?
Yep. I I think just going back to Subul's point, right? Like, I, my answer to it is 100% a people and culture challenge. And I think Subul raised a really good point earlier about like, hey, if you go to the LMS administrator, right, in the HR team and say, hey, I want access to to all of your entire system, um, they're like, people can be very protective of their data, especially in the HR team. And you're like, why are HR people
Mm.
so protective? Why are they not ready to adopt technology and so on? I don't think that is the issue, right? The issue, and I think there's a question in by Aniket. I hope I pronounced your name correctly in the Q&A um platform, that at the end of the day, it is the people who are held accountable, right?
Mm.
When your autonomous AI agent makes decisions, and if it's incorrect or if it was unintended, like those are at the end of the day, like you can't just blame the AI agent, right? It is the humans who have to take the action. And
Mm.
so, and and where HR folks are having to deal with very sensitive data, right? When you have to make sure that this data are, like they you have to make sure that they understand where the data is going, who can have access to it, what data maybe should never get out, right? Because it's so sensitive. For example, if you don't need SSN or your Aadhaar card data and so on, um, personal identifiers like date of birth, your gender, and so on, like then maybe those data should not even get out of the system at all, right? Those should be just hosted in those systems, and those are really important because one is personal identifiable information, but two, you could break all sorts of laws, right? Depending on which
Yeah.
jurisdictions you're in, the EU Act and so on. And so those are real risks that the HR folks are thinking about day in, day out. Um, and so I think that's the realities the HR folks have to deal with. But overall, in general, right, I think if you look around, AI transformation is 100% the people and culture challenge. I think as Subo mentioned, the technology exists, right? It's not just Workato, there are lots of technologies out there. Um, but with how quickly AI capabilities are advancing today, the bigger differentiation is not about who has access to the technology, it's about whether people are willing to change how they work.
Mm.
And to give you an example, right? Access to technology. About a year and a half ago, we gave everyone in the company a ChatGPT and Cloud license. We're like, hey, everyone, go use it. And then we saw kind of like adoption, and then they kind of like tapered off, right? And very,
Mm.
very few people adopted it. But what really, because people didn't know what to do with it, and people were afraid to be on it because it was not enough information available. What really helped was when our CIO came on board, right, and showed us how to do it, right? Like click here, do this, and then we started connecting systems to it, right? Our Salesforce, MCP servers, our all different kinds of servers, and we added more and more over time upon people's requests. And then showing us how to do it, telling us that it's okay if you feel like you're behind the curve. Join this session, right, the weekly session that he was hosting, and showing us how to do it. And then it started creating some kind of like healthy FOMO, right, a fear of missing out. They're like, hey, if another sales rep is doing that and they're getting, and we actually showed it through the data that they're actually closing more deals as a result of having all of that data at their fingertips versus you still doing it the traditional way of going to the systems and finding information. That helped, right? Like to help people bridge the gap between understanding what the system is capable of and then actually utilizing it, right? Um and so that's kind of like how we've started on that journey and how we've kind of like progressed, learning from our own challenges. But at the end of the day, it does take people wanting to kind of like start again, right? And I think that's also part of the beauty of AI is that it's so new. Everyone is kind of a beginner. And I think it's about creating that culture where everyone feel like they can still be part of that learning journey, even if they have not started today, right? Because I think every day there's news out there, right? Something else has happened, and you feel like you're getting further and further away from being proficient. It's okay, right? Like it's okay if here is where you start, here is where you start, right? Like be reassuring and kind of like help people along the way. And once people see the power of it, they kind of want to do more. Yeah, so that's kind of our own journey.
Yeah, thanks, June. I mean, you put it out with some examples very well as to, sometimes, you want certain team members or your leader to come and show, how you can do the task or workflow differently and how you can leverage the power of AI. Sometimes just giving the tools to people or systems and expecting them to just adopt it and change the way they do things and say that, okay, now I want 25% more productivity will not work. You have to probably, go through that process yourself in many cases and be a part of that, in intellectualization or change management and adjustment so that the people are open to those cultural shifts and so it's uh, and you also said good thing that one, you don't need to be afraid if you are a little bit behind because it, things are changing so fast. You could only be so much behind because the very next day somebody also is behind because they're doing things differently. So interesting times, and I think it was great to talk to both of you and understand various perspectives of how you view of your views about productivity and how organizations can think, break it down, and think about implementing workflows, and go stepwise towards this transformation goal that they're on. So on that note, maybe before we take the questions, I'll just say that the whole point about this whole discussion was, you need to look at productivity differently. You cannot look at just simple automation or simple task execution. You need to think about redesigning your processes, redesigning your organization, connecting various systems that you would probably not even think about, because uh, uh, that's when you will see the real benefit and change in terms of the AI-led productivity. And of course, there are challenges like how do you work with the data? How do you govern it? How do you make sure you give right kind of access? All of those things are going to play in parallel, but if you are on this journey and you are ready to make those changes and adjustments, there's technology out there, there are platforms out there which can help solve the problems faster. But at the same time, you need to be open to different solutions and different ways of reconfiguring your teams, and collaboration as well to achieve those results that are changing every day as we speak. So thank you for that interesting discussion. Very quickly about Harbinger. We've been in the industry for more than 35 years, going through a lot of transformation. What we really do is help organizations transform the way people work and learn, using technology, using AI, using consulting and so forth. Uh, um, and Harbinger and Workato, we are partners. We are helping organizations with embedding integration solutions in their products or within the enterprise, specifically targeting around workforce productivity and workforce capability development. So if you have any needs on those, feel free to reach out to either Workato or us. We'd be happy to talk about it, understand your problem statements, um, learn from some of them, and help you guide to solve them efficiently. So let me open it for questions. Let's take a quick look at if you have anything on the chat here. I think June already addressed one of them. Anything else that I think? Subha, there's one question on AI governance. Maybe I'll just pop it for you. AI governance should come the question is from Seema. She says AI governance should come at the beginning, but how do you apply governance on systems that are already in place? Probably the question is you already have deployed something, but now what do you do? Can you apply governance on it, or is it like while building the system itself, you need to do that?
Yeah, and I think definitely if the system already exists, AI governance can be applied to it. And this is where, Shrikant, your point comes in. Like if you have an external system that is doing the governance part of it, it is easier to connect it with an existing system rather than opening up the existing system, adding AI governance into it, and then making it live again. So it could be a thing about you take this external system, connect your different AI touch points with it, understand or classify the risks that you are looking at, use some kind of an orchestration mechanism so that whatever data the system was exchanging, it now passes through the governance tool so that the governance tool can now make more sense of it. So rather than making it like a very heavy engineering project, it could be made very lightweight on integration where the messages are being passed through the governance tool. So that way the audit process can begin. And if for some reason this leads to any latency issues or things like that, then of course, in subsequent upgrades to the product, AI governance can be baked inside it as well. But yes, to answer Seema's question, if a system already exists without governance, an external tool can easily integrate with it.
Thanks, Subodh, for sharing that. Chun, there's one more question. Maybe I'll bring you in here. The question is, how can HR make a case for AI transformation in terms that resonate with business leaders? I'm sure this is a pretty
we have 1 minute to answer the question.
Open-ended question, but maybe you can give us some quick tip saying that, say that you're going to make like $100,000 or whatever, so or save it. So, but yeah, your point on it.
Yeah, I think savings is one part of the puzzle, but I think tying into business value at the end of the day is the most important, right? So if we're saying that, hey, we need all our systems to be connected, like and it shouldn't just be, sure, help people apply time off easily, help people understand leave of absence policy better and so on. Like those are great, but at the end of the day, how does it tie to your business goals, right? Of driving more revenue, of attracting more customers, right? And so I think the earlier example of like, hey, could we help our sales leader make more informed decisions, right? About customer health and so on. Hey, it's really important to have HR systems connected to it as well, right? It's not just good enough to have your CRM and everything all well connected, but you actually need your HR systems. And so um, going beyond just the typical HR metrics, right? And thinking more, the next layer, which is the business values that is going to drive, right? The ultimate goal that you have, right? Like, I think that is how you help people connect the dots. Help your business leaders connect the dots between what you're trying to do from a HR perspective to, to be meaningful for the business. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you should not just look at automation or productivity, but look at the business use case. And if you are able to articulate that, mostly the business leaders will support the adoption of AI or implementation of AI or workflows that you're thinking of. So well put. That was a great question and a great thought towards the end. I think we are on top of the hour, so if there are any other questions, we'll definitely pass it on to the panelists and we'll get them answered when we post more updates. But thank you everyone for joining us for this session. I think you've been a great audience and well thought through questions also that you put forth. It was a pleasure for me to bring this conversation on behalf of Harbinger and Workato to you. Once again, I'd like to thank our panelists, Chunyan and Subodh Pide for joining us and sharing their views and experience on this topic. So thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Shrikant.
everyone.
Thank you, Chun.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.